Welcome to Managing Uncertainty, a podcast series from the experts at Bryghtpath discussing global risk, business continuity, and crisis management. Will you be ready to lead your organization through its critical moment?
We were reminiscing about some attacks and incidents that we've been through, and one that came to mind as we were setting up this episode is a few months back when there was the attack in London where the guy drove a vehicle down Westminster Bridge, hit and killed a number of civilians, killed a police officer at the entrance to Parliament, and then was shot and killed by armed police there in London. I was at a client's office in Phoenix, Arizona, and I think I had just gotten in and was in a meeting when the news alert started coming. And so I walked over with the global security team to their Global Security Operations Center, or GSOC, and kind of spent the morning with them helping manage that initial response. We are in there on a retainer basis to help them manage their crisis management and global security programs, which are kind of in transition, just for background as to what we were up to. But it's always interesting to hear what happens behind the scenes, when kind of what's the battle rhythm of what starts up when something happens. And this company had impact from this because their international subsidiary is managed out of London and was only a kilometer from where this happened.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this sort of incident or these types of incidents are not isolated. We've dealt with many such
this year, or the last few years,
many such incidents like this. So we thought it would be great to discuss what happens after the incident occurs. What happens in a command center?
Right.
What does the incident lead do? What do the rest of the parties do in a situation like this?
So I think we're going to use this as the example, kind of the experience with our client in Phoenix is, this client runs a 24/7 GSOC with a typical shift crew of between 2 and 5, depending upon the time of day. This was morning, so they had a pretty good sized crew in, including the manager over the facility. Plus, the global security leadership was in the office because the day had just gotten started, so they were all over there as well. So you had a pretty good number of hands, plus me sitting there, providing color commentary from the corner. So
you got CNN up on the screen and breaking news, this just happened.
So let's start with the TV aspect, right? Because that's how their initial notification was this popped up on TV before they started getting incident alerts from the usual sources. But they immediately, once they identified that it was in London, they switched one of their TVs off of a US station and went to BBC so they could get the direct British perspective of what was happening. And then they had CNN or MSNBC up. I don't remember which one, one of the two. And then, like most GSOCs, they have some incident notifications that are flowing in, right? They're an OSAC constituent, so they were getting the OSAC incident messaging from the State Department. Those came later. They use NC4 as an incident notification and monitoring. So they had that really quickly, that something had happened, and then they got additional updates.
Yeah, so we're trying to validate this is really a thing.
And then there's first, what is going on? So there's the initial kind of, okay, there's something big happening. The immediate second question that comes to mind for an ops center is, okay, so do we have people nearby? So you're thinking about facilities and the staff that works there, and you're also thinking about travelers.
Yep.
In this company's case, they had a facility within a kilometer that had a decent-sized staff, which means now they're going to reach out to the facility and make contact with the security team there.
Yep. Are they okay? What's going on there?
Are they accounting for the team? Or are they kicking off the process of what they need to follow? And then they're looking at travelers. And they also had travelers there. In fact, the CEO was there. Mm-hmm. London's low risk, so he wasn't with anybody. He was just there. So they were able to... So there's a direct contact from GSOC. There's an individual authorized to make that call to the CEO. So they're calling up, making sure that he's aware that this is going on and that they're okay. And then the other immediate action is, like many companies, they're using a international travel safety and security provider. That provider was also making contact and then letting us know, and then activating a panic alarm on the CEO's phone so that he knew he could hit that if the situation changed from being okay.
Yeah.
That was all in the first 15 minutes.
Yeah. And I think of the the traveler specifically, or even the business that may have potentially employees there, believe it or not everyone has the news up 24/7 like we do. So they may not actually know what's going on. So we may be the first one to actually educate them on the situation that's near them.
Mm-hmm. Then what happens, okay, so now you're 15, 20 minutes in. You've pretty much determined, or you have in flight, here's what's going on generally. Breaking news is always wrong, by the way.
Yep.
But you've made contact with your traveler. The traveler is okay. You've made contact with the business. The business thinks they're okay, but they're going to take them a while to confirm, maybe an hour, to make contact with all of their employees. Depending upon now what you have in place, you might be sending some communication or posting something, internal Twitter, internal chat, or perhaps it's just an email update that, hey, this happened, here's the impact, here's what we have in flight, here's what we've done. Maybe you're activating your crisis process, maybe not. It depends on your protocols. In this case, they didn't, but it didn't rise to that level.
Well, if nobody was involved,
Right.
then maybe it wouldn't be necessary.
Right. But if they had, then they would have, brought together their what they call their senior crisis management team, which is all kind of support staff and then a lot of the C-suite together, and you would have had, again, this multidisciplinary crisis team that would have talked about what, first, what has happened, second, the impact of that, and the third is what do we need to do to support travelers, business, anticipated other problems.
Right, and that group's going to come from different perspectives. So there you may have a travel department that could talk about different things. You may have HR, human factor at the table, right, to talk about that. You might have facilities in the area that may be addressed for whatever reason, and then, of course, your communications folks. So external communications and internal communications, right?
Exactly. And you also have you will have started your accountability of employees, and that can be as simple as a phone tree. But if you're talking about a headquarters location that has thousands of people, then you really want to have this set up so that you have a mass notification tool that can do data capture, and it can call you, SMS, email, and say, hey, Jennifer, there's been an incident at the Westminster Bridge with fatalities. The following roads or transportation stations are closed. Are you okay? Do you need assistance?
Yeah. Type Y for yes and for no, things like that.
Yeah, or in some cases, there's an app on your phone that lets you do the same thing. But knowing that your people are okay is a really big deal and probably the most important thing that you can do.
Yeah, and once your people are okay, then the concern may be, well, this person's okay, but their family is not, or their daughter was involved.
Yeah, you can start to branch out
Yes.
in terms of support.
And then also from there, you've got key partners that may not be direct employees of the business, but they're very key partners and very close partners to the business. So you may want to be looking out for them as well.
Another challenge to look at when these things happen is to look at where your travelers are staying and where your team lives. And do we need to make some decisions about, do they stay or do they go? Do they need to relocate? They need to be farther out. And we talked about this in a previous episode when we talked about Egypt, and we had to move people to a hotel, and then we had evacuated expatriates, and we had done some things. In that situation, the same applies here. Do we need to get them farther out? I mean, what was the incident, and what's really the risk of them being there? And of course, if you're moving them out of the country, then you run into the issue of, well, what passport do they hold? What's their nationality? What's passports and visas do they have, and what can you do in terms of moving them somewhere?
And because there's so many factors with moving people, that's where that multidisciplinary team can really come together and discuss, okay, what is the best situation for this individual or this family of individuals? Because it's going to be different every time.
And of course, as you're talking through this situation, you also have to be watching the situation as it is right now evolve and decide, what are you learning from that? What do you need to communicate? How does that impact the decisions you're making? Are there specific things that are happening that are triggers that indicate you need to escalate your response or de-escalate your response? And you've got to be managing all those balls in the air while you're trying to talk through the items that we just outlined.
Right. So you can't be making decisions in a silo. So as an incident lead in the past, what I have done is definitely delegate certain tasks to different people, right? So you're going to continue watching this. You're going to let me know if X, Y, and Z happens. Until then, continue watching. You're going to be working on communication. You're going to be working on this. You're going to be talking to the execs, that type of thing. So.
We encourage folks to really think about, as you think about situational awareness, to really think about where are your locations and what are your news sources available that give you accurate information about those locations. We've always been an advocate of, okay, if it happens here, then these are the TV stations that I want to tune into. Here are the news sites I'm going to pull up. Here are the Twitter feeds I'm going to monitor for that specific location that's going to give me accurate information. And I mean, here we're talking government or vetted sources, not, Jane on the street who saw something happen that might not be a valid source.
Right. And also cross-checking different sources. So if they're all saying the same thing, that's going to say something different than this one's saying this and this one's saying this. So having trained individuals that know ahead of time which ones to tune into definitely helps.
And of course, you have your government sources, OSAC from the State Department, DSAC from the FBI, InfraGard from the FBI, and others that will be making announcements. You can, if there is an international incident, the State Department will have some guidance out within a fairly reasonable amount of time, but you're going to want to react before that information comes out.
All of this is happening within the first, 2 hours, 3
first
hours?
24 hours.
24 hours.
Right. And keep in mind, some of these situations the London situation was essentially done and over in 3 to 4 hours from start to finish, and knowing the story didn't take long. But there are situations that unfold over a much longer period of time. Think about the
Boston bombing.
The Boston bombing took a week. But I was thinking of the terrorist attack on the hotels in Mumbai, India, back in 2011. I mean, that was a 36 to 48 hour situation that didn't stop. So you have to be prepared for the long haul to kind of manage through this initial response and see that continue. And then you got to start thinking about the shifts and how you relieve people and how you make sure people are getting rested to deal with what's next. And it's a lot of complexity.
Yeah, and then while you're managing this particular situation, you have to remember that other things are happening in the world besides just this situation. So you have to remember to continue monitoring everywhere else too. So that's sort of, I guess, the rundown of what an incident could look like in a corporate command center or a GSOC or command center of some kind.
So the main points here, I think, are, have your method in place for situational awareness. Plan in advance. We keep kind of reinforcing that point, but think through in advance about your news sources and where you're going to get information. Make sure you've laid out clear expectations for your crisis management team and your stakeholders, what communication you're going to send and when, and so they can expect to see that every time in a consistent manner, and really think about how you would manage accountability for employees so that you know that your people are safe and that you don't have to guess and miss out on an action that you should have taken later on.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Managing Uncertainty, produced by the experts at Bryghtpath. To receive notifications of new episodes, join our newsletter at bryghtpath.com or subscribe through your favorite podcast player, such as iTunes or Google Play. Learn more about the services and trusted advice from Bryghtpath by visiting bryghtpath.com. That's BRYGHTPATH.com.